My name is Jason. If you told me 10 years ago that my greatest ambition would become managing diaper changes and perfecting school lunches, I probably would have laughed right in your face. Life has a funny way of turning the tables. When I met Emily, I was the ambitious one, the breadwinner. I wore tailored suits, pitched ideas in boardrooms, and brought home bonuses that paid for vacations in places whose names were hard to pronounce. Emily was quiet, thoughtful, beautiful, and had a charm that grew more mesmerizing every year. But beneath that gentle smile, she was fiercely ambitious, driven in a way I'd only later fully understand. When our daughter Sophia was born, Emily was just starting to climb the corporate ladder. She'd come home exhausted but radiant, buzzing with excitement over promotions and new responsibilities. I admired that glow. It reminded me of myself in my prime. When she got the chance to lead her own team, we made a tough but mutual decision. I'd take a short break to care for Sophia, and Emily could fully commit herself to reaching her dreams. It was supposed to be temporary, but temporary turned into months, then years, and before long I found myself settled into my unexpected role, stay-at-home dad. At first I genuinely loved it. Watching Sophia take her first steps, hearing her first words, teaching her to read and ride a bike, it was rewarding in ways no boardroom could ever replicate. Emily's career took off spectacularly, and she became a rising star at her firm. I cheered her on from the sidelines, proud of every milestone she achieved. But soon, I began to notice subtle shifts. The warm, appreciative smiles from Emily faded into hurried nods. My cheerful morning texts were met with curt replies, usually busy or talk later. It wasn't sudden. Rather, it was a slow, gradual chilling, like feeling summer fade into fall and realizing only after the leaves have fallen that the warmth has gone. Then the whispers started. Small jokes at dinner parties, subtle jabs about my domestic expertise, or her introducing me not as Jason, her husband, but as Jason, our full-time dad. Her colleagues would smile politely, but their eyes betrayed a quiet judgment. It all came to a head one Saturday night. Emily had invited several coworkers over for drinks to celebrate her recent promotion to VP, her highest accomplishment yet. I'd spent the whole day preparing the house, cooking Emily's favorite dishes, and setting up the backyard perfectly. As I walked out carrying a tray of appetizers, I overheard her voice, sharp with laughter, clearly audible from the patio. "Oh, Jason, he's great at housework, the absolute best. Honestly, I couldn't ask for a better accessory." She paused, chuckling. "But let's face it, having him around the house is more decorative than functional. He might as well come with a stand, like those participation trophies they give kids who never actually win anything." Laughter erupted around her. I froze in my tracks, the tray trembling slightly in my hands. Anger, shame, and confusion surged through me, each emotion fighting for dominance. Part of me wanted to burst outside and confront her. Another part wanted to slip away quietly and pretend I hadn't heard a thing. Instead, I stood frozen in the shadows of our own home, a bitter realization taking hold. I'd become a trophy husband, something Emily displayed proudly when convenient but otherwise utterly ignored. I was invisible except when she needed to show off her complete set: career, child, supportive husband. That night, as I lay awake next to her, her breathing slow and peaceful beside me, I stared at the ceiling. My mind raced, not with anger but determination. I'd given up my career willingly for her success and our family's well-being, but that didn't make me worthless. It didn't make me decorative. Emily had unknowingly sparked something inside me, a fire I'd forgotten existed. If she believed I was nothing more than a participation trophy, it was time to prove her wrong, not by confrontation, but by silent action. I was done being invisible, but she wouldn't know it, at least not yet. The next morning, nothing had changed on the surface. Emily sipped her coffee, scrolling through her phone while I packed Sophia's lunch. The sun was pouring into the kitchen, the air smelled like toasted bread, and everything looked normal. But I wasn't. I moved through my routine like clockwork, but something in me had shifted. I didn't mention what I'd heard. I didn't ask for an apology. And strangely enough, I didn't want one. Her words had done something more powerful than hurt me. They'd reminded me who I used to be, and I wasn't about to ask her permission to find that man again. That same day, after dropping Sophia off at school, I sat in front of my laptop and opened a blank document. Not to write a resume? No. That was the old Jason, the one who played by rules and titles. This time, I wanted control. I wanted something of my own, something no one could diminish or mock. Years ago, before corporate life took over, I dabbled in digital design, logos, branding, even UI work. Back then, it was just a side hustle. But now, it could be a lifeline. I started small. I updated my skills, watched tutorials, took notes at night, while Emily binged crime shows in the living room. I didn't talk about what I was doing. Not to her, not to anyone. My old connections were still out there, dusty but intact. I reached out. Some remembered me. One even offered me a small freelance gig designing a logo for his new podcast. It paid a few $100s, but it wasn't about the money. It was about momentum. Every free hour I had, I worked. At night, I'd stay up late under the hum of my laptop, refining, studying, improving. I stopped waiting for Emily to come to bed. I stopped hoping for thank yous. I was quietly rebuilding myself, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. Meanwhile, Emily's career only kept rising. She came home later. She laughed louder on phone calls I wasn't part of, and slowly she began to include me less in conversations about our future, plans, vacations, even decisions about Sophia's schooling. One night, she joked again in front of Sophia. "Mommy's the boss, right? Daddy just makes great pancakes." Sophia giggled. She didn't know better. But the way Emily smirked as she walked away told me she did. And still, I said nothing, because I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. Within a few months, I had 5 recurring clients. I wasn't just doing logos anymore. I was helping companies shape their entire online presence. My work started getting shared. Referrals rolled in. I registered an LLC under a pseudonym. I separated the bank account. Everything was neat, clean, and invisible. Emily had no clue. She thought I was still stuck in place, still folding laundry and wiping counters, still waiting for her approval like some obedient pet. Let her. Every jab, every smug smirk, every careless insult, she was writing her own ending without knowing it. What she didn't realize was that I had quietly reclaimed my power. And when the time was right, she'd realize it too. But by then, it would be too late. It happened at one of Emily's company parties. She invited me out of obligation more than excitement. "Just smile and don't talk about stay-at-home stuff," she joked while throwing on lipstick in the mirror. I let it slide like I always did, but inside something twisted. I wasn't embarrassed by the life I had chosen for our family. She was. The venue was upscale, the kind with white tablecloths and staff that refold your napkin if you get up to use the restroom. Everyone was in suits except me. I wore my best shirt and blazer, but I still felt out of place, as if the invite said +1, but the room screamed, "Why is he here?" Emily thrived there. She laughed with colleagues, shared inside jokes, spoke confidently about numbers and strategy. I stood beside her, smiling politely, until the conversation shifted. "Oh, so this is Jason," one of her coworkers said, grinning too wide. "We've heard so much about you, the house executive, right?" I chuckled awkwardly, trying not to show the sting. Emily just smirked. "Yeah, he runs a tight ship, laundry, lunchboxes, and legendary vacuum lines," she added, raising her glass in a faux toast. Laughter followed. I stood still, heat rising in my ears. "Don't forget school pickups and keeping my plants alive," she added, nudging me like we were in on the joke together. But I wasn't laughing. Someone else chimed in, a junior manager with a drink in his hand and too much confidence in his mouth. "Hey, every power woman needs a trophy husband these days. At least he's pretty." That drew even more laughs. Emily didn't stop it. She didn't say, "Hey, that's enough." She just sipped her wine and smiled like it was all harmless fun. I excused myself. In the bathroom mirror, I stared at my reflection. I wasn't angry. I was disappointed, exhausted by the fact that no matter what I gave to this family, to her, it would never be enough. Not in her eyes. I had given her my full support for years. I had traded business meetings for ballet recitals, late-night pitches for middle-of-the-night fevers. And yet, to her, I was a punchline. But I wasn't going to argue anymore. I wasn't going to demand respect. I had already made up my mind months ago. This was a countdown. When I returned to the table, Emily leaned in, tipsy now. "What's wrong? Don't be so sensitive. You are kind of my trophy husband. Take it as a compliment." I smiled. She didn't know it yet, but I had become something far more dangerous than angry. I had become indifferent. While Emily basked in recognition and attention from her colleagues, I worked in silence. What she didn't know was that during nap times, school drop-offs, and those quiet hours between house chores, I had been building something of my own. It started with a copywriting gig, a one-off project helping a small business write emails. Then another client came, then 3. Before long, I was managing full campaigns for small startups. I never mentioned it to Emily. At first because I wasn't sure it would go anywhere. Later because it felt good to have something that belonged only to me. She used to talk a lot about ambition, about drive, about wanting to build an empire. I used to support her dreams with everything I had. But the irony was, while she was out chasing success, I had quietly stepped into my own. I turned the guest room into a part-time office. During the day, it was where I folded laundry and stacked board games. At night, it transformed. One monitor, one notebook, one man determined to reclaim his dignity. That was all it took, and I never forgot her words. Jason's not really career material. He just doesn't have that edge. He's sweet, but safe. He's basically a golden retriever who can cook. She said these things to her friends on speakerphone, never imagining I could hear. But I did. I always did. And with every casual insult, with every smirk at my expense, I wrote another email, closed another contract, raised my rate a little higher. Not out of spite, out of necessity, not to get even, but to get free. I didn't want revenge. I wanted options. But life had its own timing. One morning, Emily came home furious. A deal had fallen through. A junior associate got promoted instead of her. She stormed into the kitchen, heels clicking like gunshots. Unbelievable. They said I'm too aggressive, too sharp. You know what that means, right? I nodded, stirring the pasta sauce I'd made from scratch. It means they're intimidated by a woman who knows her worth. Meanwhile, I come home to a man who folds towels for a living. The words hit like glass in the chest. Sharp, unnecessary, but not unfamiliar. She didn't apologize. She never did, just popped a bottle of wine and muttered something about me not understanding how the real world works. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Because 2 hours later, while she sulked on the couch watching some crime show, I was on a Zoom call with a venture-backed CEO pitching a rebrand strategy. He loved it, signed a retainer on the spot, 5 figures, recurring. All from the same man she said doesn't understand the real world. That night, after she went to bed, snoring from too much Chardonnay and ego, I sat alone in the living room, watching the moonlight stretch across the floorboards. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since before our wedding. Power, not the kind that demands attention, not loud or flashy, just steady, quiet, earned. There comes a moment in every slow-burning storm when the wind changes. It doesn't roar. It doesn't announce itself. It simply shifts. Quiet, but irreversible. For me, that moment came one afternoon when Emily left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. She never used to care who saw her screen. She always said there was nothing to hide. But that day, she was halfway through a conference call when the doorbell rang. I told her I'd get it, and she rushed upstairs to take the rest of her meeting in peace. She didn't log out. I wasn't snooping, but I saw it. An open Slack thread, full of casual chats between her and coworkers, memes, rants about clients, gossip about their boss, and then a thread titled Home Life. I paused. I shouldn't have clicked. I know that. But I did. And there it was. Lines and lines of jokes. About me. About my domestic skills. About how I should start a cooking YouTube channel. About how I was the real housewife in the relationship. One of her coworkers had even typed, "Jason deserves a medal for surviving all day with nothing to do but make lunch." And she replied, "I know, right? Poor guy thinks he's contributing. At least the laundry's always folded." They laughed. Heart reacts. Thumbs up emojis. I didn't move for a full minute, just stared. It wasn't what she said. It was that she said it to them. She invited their laughter. She built her image at my expense. I closed the laptop and washed the dishes, my hands shaking under the warm water. That night, I didn't mention it. Not because I was afraid, because I was done asking for her respect. From that day on, I changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just subtly. I stopped waiting for her to come home before eating dinner. I stopped asking about her day. I stopped folding her clothes. And I started planning. I created a second bank account, quietly transferred my earnings, hired a CPA to handle my growing income, and set up a legal business under an LLC. Got a P.O. box, created a new email address, reserved a 1-bedroom apartment across town, month-to-month lease, move-in date, 3 months away. Every task was a stitch in the parachute I was sewing, quietly, patiently, carefully. She didn't notice. Of course she didn't. Emily was far too busy rising. She got the promotion she'd been chasing for 2 years. VP of strategy, fancy new title, even fancier attitude. She walked in one day waving a bottle of champagne, celebrating her victory like she had climbed Everest. I toasted with her, smiled for the Instagram post, held her waist in front of the mirror, and later that night, while she snored beside me, I looked at the same photo and thought, you really believe I'll always be here. One evening, we went to her firm's annual gala. I wore the suit she picked out for me, tailored, charcoal gray. She wore a red dress so sharp it could cut steel. At one point in the evening, a colleague walked over and said, "So you're the famous house husband?" I smiled politely. He turned to Emily. "You're lucky. I can't even get my girlfriend to do the dishes." Emily laughed. "Oh, Jason's the whole package. Cleaner, cook, nanny. He's basically my personal assistant." The table chuckled, so did I, because that was the last time I'd ever laughed for her. Later that night, she leaned over in the car, tipsy from wine and compliments, and said, "You know, they all envy me." "Do they?" I asked. "Yeah, not every woman gets a man so agreeable." I nodded, staring at the road. Agreeable. That's what I'd become to her, a doormat with dinner ready. She didn't know it yet, but I'd already found my spine again. And it wasn't bending anymore. Some exits don't come with slamming doors. They begin as silent absences. One skipped sentence at dinner, a smile withheld, a presence no longer felt. And that's how it started. The night everything tipped, it wasn't violent. No shouting match, no betrayal caught on camera. Just a stage, a microphone, and a joke dressed as gratitude. That month, Emily had been nominated for Executive Visionary of the Year, a national recognition reserved for the elite, the unstoppable, the untouchable. She lived for this, ate it, breathed it, wore it like armor. Our home turned into a backstage dressing room, designer gowns draped over kitchen chairs, foundation brushes left beside coffee mugs, phone calls, emails, fittings, interviews. She barely noticed when meals were made, when socks were folded, when silence filled our evenings like fog. There was only one thing on her mind, winning. And maybe somewhere along the line, she'd forgotten she wasn't doing it alone. The award night came. An ocean of crystal chandeliers reflected in polished marble. Laughter clinked in glasses of champagne. Suits tailored within an inch of their cost, dresses that could stop traffic, and centerpieces that cost more than our old family car. Emily, breathtaking, hair sculpted into perfection, skin glowing like golden silk, a smile made for camera flashes and conquest. And me, still her husband, but increasingly just a silhouette beside the spotlight. They sat us near the stage, front row, important, visible. I listened as she traded stories with billionaires, witty, clever, unbothered. Every now and then she'd touch my hand, an accessory gesture, something to complete the picture. Then the host stepped onto the stage. "Tonight," he said, voice rich with ceremony, "we celebrate leadership forged through vision and resilience." Applause thundered through the hall. Emily straightened. My hand was still in hers, but only barely. "And the 2025 Executive Visionary of the Year is Emily Hart." Standing ovation. She gasped, perfectly rehearsed, turned toward me. "You should get this on camera," she whispered. "Not a kiss, not a thank you, just a task." So I took the photo, captured her moment, framed it with care, because that's what you do with trophies. You display them proudly. She glided to the podium, gracious, polished, triumphant, until the speech turned. "At home," she said, laughter laced through her voice, "I'm the one with the spreadsheets and deadlines, but I'll admit my secret weapon has always been, well, my stay-at-home husband." Polite chuckles. "I mean, someone's got to fold the towels, right?" Laughter rippled louder. "And bless him, he makes a great house model. You should see the apron collection. Honestly, he makes it look better than I ever could." Applause. I stopped breathing. Somewhere between the punchlines and polished smiles, I faded completely. No rage burned in my chest. No heat flushed my face, just a deep, cavernous hollowness and clarity. I left before dessert, slipped out while the ballroom still echoed with laughter that had no idea it had buried someone. She didn't notice, or maybe she didn't care to. The walk to the street was quiet, brisk air cutting through my tux like paper. At home, I logged into the account she didn't know existed, numbers glowing back at me like a secret I'd loved more than myself. First and last month's rent on a condo already secured, movers scheduled, domain for my online business thriving in the background, and in 2 weeks, when she hung that crystal plaque in her office, I'd be gone. No letter, no confrontation, just an empty closet, a used to be, a silence so loud it might echo for years. There's a particular kind of silence that doesn't hum with peace. It screams. And that's what greeted Emily the morning after her greatest victory. Her heels clicked across the tile as she returned home late, still basking in the attention from the media buzz. Her phone was filled with congratulations, likes, story mentions, LinkedIn pings, validation everywhere. She was glowing until she noticed something was off. There was no dinner waiting on the counter. No folded laundry stacked neatly on the side table. No faint scent of Jason's cedarwood aftershave lingering in the air. Just the stillness. Unsettling. Unexpected. Undeniable. "Jason?" she called out. No answer. She walked through the kitchen, expecting to find him in the living room, maybe asleep, or working on one of his silly little online projects. Nothing. She tried the bedroom. Half of the closet was empty. Her laughter, the kind she used to mask discomfort, slipped out instinctively. What, did he take the wrong suitcase or something? But the joke didn't land, not even to herself. That was when she saw it. A single envelope, propped neatly against the mirror, as if it were always part of the decor, her name written on the front, in his handwriting. Her hand shook as she picked it up. "Emily, congrats on your win. You earned it, truly. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as your partner and started seeing me as your punchline. I gave you the space to lead, to rise, to become everything you wanted to be. But instead of rising with me, you rose past me and pulled the ladder up behind you. I wasn't your house husband. I was your foundation, your safety net, your biggest fan. But you wanted a stage more than you wanted a home, so now the curtain's yours. No need to call. Everything's settled. You'll find the documents with my lawyer. P.S. That silly little online business. Turns out it wasn't so silly." Jason. The letter slipped from her fingers like it had weight. Suddenly, the award on her shelf looked less like a crown and more like a gravestone. She scrambled to her phone, dozens of texts from coworkers, not one from Jason. She dialed, straight to voicemail, texted, "Come on, let's talk. Where are you? This is childish, Jason." No response. She paced, cursed, slammed drawers, called his sister, his best friend. No one had seen him. That night, she didn't sleep. The next morning, she woke up in a bed that felt colder than it had ever felt, even when he used to lie beside her. 2 days later, she arrived at work and found his face on her screen. An industry blog had picked up a story. "Stay-at-home dad builds seven-figure business in silence. Now he's out on his own." It was him. The man she used to joke about not having a job. The man she paraded as her trophy husband. The same man now featured on Forbes. Next 100. Suddenly, the whispers began. In the elevator. In the break room. Someone asked, "Wait, isn't that your husband?" Correction was. Her silence spoke louder than any answer could. A week passed. Emily finally stopped pretending he was just blowing off steam. She had called every contact she could find, sent desperate messages through mutual friends, and even tried to reach his lawyer directly. But Jason didn't need to scream. He had already spoken, louder than she ever had. By leaving. What stung more wasn't that he was gone. It was that he didn't seem to miss her at all. His face was everywhere now. News outlets, podcasts, a headline that read, "From house husband to hustler, meet Jason Grant, the silent builder." She watched him speak on one of those interviews, her heart caught in her throat. Same man, same voice, but different eyes. He was calm, poised, confident, not bitter, not vengeful, just free. "You know," Jason said on the podcast, "people assume silence means weakness, but sometimes silence is the loudest thing we have. I didn't leave to punish anyone. I left to stop punishing myself." That line, it shattered something inside her. It wasn't just the success. It was the self-respect in his voice, the same self-respect she had spent years chipping away at. Later that month, she bumped into one of her old colleagues at a networking event. They made small talk, until he asked the question, "Hey, wasn't your husband the guy who just launched that remote consulting empire? Jason something?" She smiled weakly, pretending she didn't hear it. She left early that night, drove home in silence, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel proud of what she'd built. Because she finally saw that she had lost something bigger than a marriage. She had lost a good man. Meanwhile, Jason stood in the quiet of his new apartment, not lavish, not flashy, but peaceful. A window view overlooking the skyline. His laptop rested beside a stack of children's books. He had just video called Mason before bed. The boy was adjusting. Kids always bounce faster than adults. He placed a frame on the shelf, a photo of Mason, and next to it, a note card that simply read, "You weren't small, she just refused to see your worth." He didn't write it. One of his new clients had sent it in a thank you letter, but it stayed with him, because it was true. He stood there a moment longer, then looked at the camera he'd been setting up for his next video. A new kind of storytelling, a new kind of voice, his own. He hit record, smiled, and said quietly, "Welcome to the silent exit." Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is walk away without looking back. Not out of hate, but out of self-love. Have you ever had to choose silence over chaos? Tell us in the comments. And if this story spoke to you, like, share, and subscribe for more stories of quiet power, deep healing, and true worth.